Will the tariff shock send us into recession here and overseas? Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to better navigate these turbulent times. The damage of the sweeping tariffs put forth last week is not just higher prices. Perhaps even more harmful is the disruptions they pose to supply chains. We learned painfully from the pandemic that interruptions in the intricate, often complex processes that go into the production of goods and services cannot be quickly undone. It's not like turning a switch on and off. The disturbances to supply chains lead, at least for a period of time, to higher prices as well. The longer these tariffs stay in place, the longer will be the recovery time and the probability of a severe economic downturn. This is why President Trump must offer a 90-day tariff moratorium to any country or the European Union, a group of countries that wants to negotiate a deal and make the announcement as soon as possible. What is stunning markets is both the scope of the taxes announced last week and the weird, capricious way they are calculated. The average tariff rate for Taiwan is 2%, yet it gets hit with a 32% tariff. Thanks to a previous free trade agreement with South Korea, most of our products get into that market tax-free, yet that country is slammed with a 25% tariff. Brazil imposes all sorts of non-tariff red tape barriers that make importing to that country very difficult. By contrast, Chile, where we have a free trade agreement, is whacked with the same tariff as Brazil. There is no rationale for such disparities. Making the whole thing even more absurd is that remote, insignificant areas of the world were subject to tariffs. The only inhabitants, for example, of the Heard and McDonald Islands are penguins and seals. Yet we're imposing a 10% tariff. What President Trump's trade officials did was to take our trade deficit with a country and divide it by our imports from that country. For instance, with China last year, the deficit was $295 billion, and our imports from China were $439 billion. Do the division, and you get 67%. The actual average Chinese tariff was 24%. All this ignores actual trade barriers, as we see with Brazil and other countries like it. It also has a critical ally like Japan, now subject to a 24% tariff, while our enemy Iran gets only 10%. The assumption is that any trade deficit with any country is bad, that a trade deficit is the equivalent of a company losing money. The assumption is profoundly wrong. A country's trade balance in and of itself is no indicator of its economic prowess. It only means we buy more from the rest of the world than it buys from us. A considerable part of our imports are component parts used by producers. The U.S. routinely ran trade deficits in the 1800s as we experienced rapid growth and became the most powerful industrial nation in the world. While we bought more than we sold to others, we are importing globs of capital to finance our extraordinary expansion. During our worst economic period in our history, during the Great Depression, by contrast, we had trade surpluses. After the Reagan tax cuts and other reforms, the U.S. overall had great growth for almost 20 years, even though we had trade deficits. What really hurts manufacturers was our high taxes, which President Trump started to tackle in his first-term tax cut bill and wants to do even more of in a new tax bill, and brutal, costly regulations. These started to be pared back in the first Trump administration and are now being vigorously attacked by DOGE. Of course, unfair trade barriers must be attacked, and that can be done without imposing global tariffs. What determines an economy's health is taxes, regulation, the size of government, and the soundness of its currency, not trade balances. The quicker these tariffs are suspended, the more likely we can avoid an economic disaster. I'm Steve Forbes. Thanks for listening. Do send in your comments and suggestions. I look forward to being with you soon again.